right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from those who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughn, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can join the movement at togetherindigital.com. And today we are diving into a game-changing approach that could revolutionize your business. The iMove, I-M-O-V-E method is with our special guest, Taylor. She is here to help share her expertise on how this innovative strategy can help entrepreneurs and business leaders reach new heights. If you're looking to harness your intuition for smarter decision making, optimize your marketing and operations, and accelerate growth with precision, you are in the right place, friends. Whether you are a startup founder or a $1 million enterprise owner or anywhere in between, you have got actionable insights to unlock. We've got actionable insights to unlock your full potential. Today, our guest, Taylor, will bring a wealth of experience to the table. She is a certified mentor and iMove specialist, and she has guided Fortune 100 companies and helped countless entrepreneurs become dominant forces in their industries. Love it. With her quantum power days, which have become renowned for shifting business into growth overdrive. In a time in which it feels like everybody's just pedaling backwards, we're really excited to dive in with Taylor and discover how intuition, marketing, operations, velocity, and execution, hey, I move, can propel you towards success. Taylor, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me on. I am stoked to be able to chat with you today.
Absolutely. Many of you who are Together Digital members already know we have a growing number of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. So I know a lot of you that are listening are hungry to hear what Taylor has to share, but obviously what we're sharing today works if you are working within a company or organization. So don't feel like we're not talking to you, but also, if you're entrepreneur curious, we really want to encourage you to take what you learn here today and maybe feel brave and make that leap and make that step into entrepreneurship. Right before we jumped on here, Taylor and I were talking about how, it's hard to imagine ever going back. So let's start there, Taylor. Let's talk about, before we go into iMove, I want to hear a little bit more, and I'm sure our listeners are curious about your career journey and backstory. How did you go from owning 4 diverse companies to becoming a business coach for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I actually I'm one of those few people that I loved my corporate career. I was in marketing, operations, strategy, leadership for over 15 years. And it actually wasn't until I left that I realized this was a term, which was intrapreneur. I had never heard that in my life, but that was exactly what I was in my corporate career. It was always which I don't think I could have stomached it any other way, but it was always, hey, we have this idea, throwing me the keys and saying, take it and run. And in fact, in one of those scenarios, I was hired to work at a company and they were starting a new department. So they brought me in to spearhead this new department, and they thought they'd get clients really quickly. They had 2 that were lined up and they fell off. And so I was at a new job, twiddling my thumbs going, okay, I got to be providing value here, but those clients aren't coming in anymore. So this new department is not a thing. And I'm the only person. And I had built it all out. So it was ready to go, but I had nothing to do. And so they had brought me in on a phone call with a large international client, and they said, hey, we just want to bring you in because they're trying to fill my time. And I'm trying to fill my time. And 3 months goes by after that meeting. And they said, hey, we want to launch this department, this division. And that client, in the hour that you were on the phone with them, they loved everything you had to say. We need somebody to run this. We have no idea how to do it. Take the keys and run. And I'm like, you got it. So that was the launching my international team, where we started with 0 team members. And in a 3-year period, we went from 0 to 30 team members. We went from 1 service to 5, from one language to servicing in 5 different languages. I always say
Wow.
5.5 because we also did European Spain Spanish and North America Spanish. So, but
Mm-hmm.
technically 5. And we made millions of dollars in revenue in a very short amount of time. And I even had the wonderful opportunity of living for 6 weeks in Edinburgh, Scotland, setting up our EMEA, our European team. And
Mm-hmm.
in that, for the first year and a half of that 3-year period, I didn't have a boss. The people who had hired me originally had left, and I was just now in charge of this team that nobody knew what it was happening, and we are just crushing it. And I should note that the client that we did that for was Google. So it was like the company would say, "Oh, Google is our client," but had no clue what we were doing. And so I would actually go around every month and say to a different executive leader, can I just
Mm-hmm.
take a half hour of your time and share what's happening with my department so that someone knows what's happening?
Right.
And I was running our own HR. Like, we didn't have
Wow.
HR support, our hiring, our onboarding. I was running our finances, our analytics. Like, it was my own business within this company,
Yep.
which is the true example of the entrepreneur. I just didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved what was happening there. And at the 3-year period, I was like, okay, I'm ready to move to the next challenge. And I went and worked for another company and started doing similar, like, let's get this going, ramping it up. And I started to feel like, the impact that I can make when it comes to these corporate settings. Oh, I'm definitely making an impact, which is what I live for and I love. Making a difference,
Mm-hmm.
but it's making a difference on a very small scale, because also, like, working with clients like Google, Johnson & Johnson, Stanford University, like, they're big deals already. Like, the work we're doing is impactful and significant, but like, they don't really need
Right.
more. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I loved coaching and helping my team members grow professionally and develop that way, and career pathing and all of that. And I love setting the culture and the leadership, but it felt like onesies, twosies.
Yeah.
And I realized that there was this space on the other side that I could be helping entrepreneurs and business owners really get good at business, doing what I had been implementing. And I had acknowledged the iMove method by then, and really
Mm-hmm.
supporting them to grow. In conjunction with that, I also had gotten, while growing this team in this department, I had gotten my life coaching certification. And so I was actually running coaching on the side and helping my clients. And I did happiness mentoring. So I'd help them be happier in
Oh,
their
fun.
lives.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is that we would work on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, they'd come to me at a 2 or 3. We'd work together for 10 weeks. And by the time we had finished working together, they'd be 7s, 8s, and 9s
Yeah.
consistently in their personal joy and happiness in their day-to-day life. And what inevitably would happen every time is that the clients I was working with were entrepreneurs. And they would
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh my gosh, my relationships are better. My day to day is better. I love hanging out with my kids now. Like, everything is so much better. If only I could get my business to the next level." And I
Right.
was like, I'm leading this secret life to them, where I'm helping these corporations, not only the corporations I was working for, but the clients that we were working for, grow and develop and get good at business. And so there was this opportunity of, how do we make the most impact? And I say we, it's me and the mouse in my pocket, but that's crossover from leading teams, right? It's always a
Yeah.
we. But
Yep.
how do we make this bigger impact? And how do we help the little guys get good at business and help them be happier in all areas of their life? And so it really came to this point of like, yeah, I think I'm ready to dive in and support entrepreneurs and business owners. And the impact there for me is, yes, I'm helping people in like a 1-to-1 scale and very customized, because business is
Mm-hmm.
different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But their business is helping them, their families, their communities,
Mm-hmm.
their
Yes.
regions. And
Yes.
then their clients have
Mm-hmm.
that same impact. So the ripple effect and the impact on day-to-day life of the
Yeah.
individuals throughout the world is so much more massive and so much more empowering and inspiring for me, that I just
Right.
absolutely love what I do.
Yeah. Rather than making, like you said, the Johnsons and Johnsons and Googles of the world a little bit more pocket money, you're fueling local economies, helping families and things like that in ways that, yeah, I know I can totally see that. I relate to so much of that. And I think a lot of our listeners will as well, as a lot of them probably do work
Mhm.
for larger agencies, conglomerate owned companies, and things like that. Even when you have these big companies with big structures, what's amazing, I think, what is relatable about your story is that this happens to women a lot, right? Where they see us and they say, ooh, you're multi-talented, multifaceted. You can people, you can manage finance, you can manage process. So here's this completely crazy ass unicorn role and opportunity, and we're going to hand it on over to you. Like, we literally had this conversation yesterday during our Together Digital Job Seekers peer group, where one of our members just really was having a moment because she felt like she had lost her identity in the time that she spent in an organization where they gave her so many different disparate roles. But Taylor, what's different about the way you saw the story was that you said, hey, look, I am capable of all these things, and I can take the combination of all of my skills and abilities and those strengths and use them and tool them into a business of my own that then empowers others' business. And sometimes it's a matter of that perspective. So you can guarantee that I'm sending her this episode and a big old hug and some love, because I think that a lot of times we just don't see that, like, these are strengths, that sometimes these disparate, what feel like disparate abilities is actually what you're saying. If you can do these kinds of things, it's like you are an entrepreneur, which means you have the ability to be an entrepreneur, right? Love
Entrepreneur.
it. I love it.
Well, and I would say too, like I hated to this day. If I had to, I'd be like, oh, cringe. I hate filling out my resume or job to
Yeah.
job applications or anything like that. I mean, I haven't done it for years now,
Mm-hmm.
but back in the day when it's like, okay, I'm ready for the next thing, it felt so impossible to apply for a job because it's like, yeah, I can do this, but also I can do all of this, and they all
Yes.
feed together. And if it
Uh-huh.
wasn't in an entrepreneurial, like, here, take this space, it was
Uh-huh.
so hard to even get a foot in the door. And that, especially as women, it's like, okay, well, I am extremely overqualified, but I'm overqualified in 100 different areas for this
Right.
one job that's looking for this. And so when you don't get the call back, or you're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, is this really a good fit? You start to, I mean, for me, I would just feel sick to my stomach because I'm like,
Yeah.
I really am. And I'm not, I actually don't think we're as rare as we think we are. But at the time, I'm
Right.
like, I am a unicorn. Like, I have to
Mm-hmm.
find the right place that
Yep.
can support my abilities because
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be beneficial to them. But if you
Yep.
don't have the connection with the hiring person already, it feels so
Yes.
impossible to even level up in jobs. And
Agree.
sometimes you hit those ceilings. Like,
Oh,
I hit the
100%.
ceilings too,
Yes.
where it was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm running this, and I'm in, at the time
Yeah.
I was in like a director role, I think it was. And I was like,
Really?
I'm doing all of this. And I built out
You're doing like a
operationally because,
CEO role. Yeah.
oh yeah. And so, like, operationally, I was like, I'm building two roles beneath me, because
Mm-hmm.
most people can't do all the things I've been doing. So, like, as we grow and scale, here's the two roles that would support beneath. So
Yep.
now I'm thinking career pathing for the next level people as well, right?
Yep.
Two roles beneath my current role and job description. And then I did two ahead.
Yep.
And I was already doing the two ahead. And when I went and was like, by the way, granted, I built them all out, but I was like, by the way, here's the career pathing for this and this role in my department,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm already at the two steps ahead. And they're like, well, we can't do that. You can't get the raise to that title
Right.
because of the pay bands, and you're already at the top of the pay band, and we don't, and it's just all these things. And I'm like, I'm literally making you guys millions of dollars. You
Right.
get to say Google is your client when you don't
Yep.
have a clue what we're talking about. And you have none of the stress of running this department, yet I can't, I'm hitting that ceiling going,
Yep.
okay, like, where do I go from here? And how also that's really disappointing from a level of I cared about my team and I cared about their
Yep.
career and growth pathing. And so now I'm limited on that because I'm like, if I can't hit that glass ceiling for me, I
Yep.
can't bring the rest of my team along with me. And
Yep.
that's one of the things I love about owning my own businesses, because I do own 4 different businesses, and probably 65, 75% of my time is in my business coaching space. But I'm growing teams and I'm building culture, and I can set
Right.
the pay bands,
Yep.
air quotes around those, right?
Yep.
I can set those and I can say, hey, this is the career pathing that I see with you working within our organization, and where we have these gaps that need to be filled. Does that align with you? And here's where I'm thinking that pay can go. And there is no cap because we are
It's infinite.
doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's infinite, and we're doing it collaboratively and as a team, instead of,
Exactly.
hey, let me come work for you, bust my butt, and then have you tell me that's not enough. And I think that there's so many women in the space that have been told that. I know I'm not alone.
Nope.
And we're all unicorns in our spaces,
We are.
but it's like the experience of us unicorns is not that common. It's kind of universal at this point.
It is. I agree, especially in the space of like digital marketing, advertising, because it's an ever evolving and we're all hungry self-learners. We do tend to kind of want to, we also are in fear constantly of being marginalized for our gender and as we age, so that we tend to say, oh, I have to stay relevant. So then we're always, again, just are naturally hungry, but then continue to learn and grow, especially within our community. And I don't know if you can see the live chat, but already like one of our live listeners is like, this is very familiar. But I agree. And I, anybody who's listening as well, who works for an organization, I mean, industries and organizations, this is where you need to evolve. You should be looking for your entrepreneurs. These are the people that will be, should be, could be leading your companies and organizations. You want people who work across disciplines, who understand cross-disciplinary like processes, because those are more collaborative people. Those are people who are going to understand how things get done and don't just dictate. I think this whole idea of lanes and isolation and just title specific stuff, it never sat well with me, even when I was still in the industry. When people were like, pick your lane and stay in it, I was like, okay, sure. It never sat well with me early on. And it's probably, again, why I should have realized sooner I was like meant for this space, maybe a little more. But I also think, at some point, industries and companies have to evolve to start to allow for this type of work, because I think it is the ways in which, like you said, there's more of us out there than what everyone even realizes. Okay, let's get to iMove, because this could be like a whole other conversation for the whole hour. But live listeners, don't forget to use the chat outside of for the little praise hands and agreeing, which I know you all are feeling it right now. Please feel free to ask questions if you have them. All right, let's get into the iMove method a bit. Can you break it down for us a little bit? I know we're going to get into kind of each of the letters, but like, how did you develop this approach, and how did you find it particularly effective for women entrepreneurs specifically?
Absolutely. So I discovered in all the entrepreneurial stuff, and as well, like I developed it there and started testing it with my businesses and these other components, and have seen it work consistently, and then have now been helping for a couple of years now women entrepreneurs with this method as well. So I would suggest it, I would say it is proven. But the way that I leaned in was I actually didn't have the I first. And it was like, cool, I have experience and I know that like you have to have your marketing. Okay, well, your marketing could be the best in the world and maybe it's leading to sales, but then operationally, if your, and I'm going to say department, because again, this is where I learned it first, right? My department would fall to pieces. So it was like, okay, we've got to operationally set this up for success so that the marketing, as the marketing is working, can support the operations.
Yeah.
At which point now we really start to get that momentum, that velocity in what we're doing. And the combination of all that allows our team members to execute with ease. So it was like, awesome. No matter what I'm doing, that move method is coming into play. Fast forward, So I leave corporate, I start working for myself and start working with and for these other businesses that I am an owner in. And I started to see same thing, right? What was needed? Well, everybody's like, well, how do I market my business? What's my message? What's my audience? Market, 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 market. And then it was like, cool, we've got the marketing, but we have no way to support the actual business and have a clear customer experience. And operationally, we're not setting our team members up for success if we don't have standard operating procedures and things like that in place. So, and we can't hire appropriately. I mean, all of it. So it was like operations was crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Once we got that, we could focus on the strategies that would give us more velocity in the business. And again, be able to execute with ease. So on the corporate and on more of the, I'm going to call them my enterprise startups, because they were startup organizations in tech, in manufacturing, and both of those valued at over 10 million in our first year. But they were in that like more corporatized space, right? And I'm still in those, which is great. When I started working with the smaller business owners and looking at my business, my coaching business, getgoodatbusiness.com, right? When I started looking at that, I would do the marketing and I would do the operations and I would do all these pieces, and it wasn't hitting that tipping point. Like it wasn't crossing over. And it was like, okay, well, I know the marketing, like, and I know how to do all of this. Why isn't it working? And I'm going to share a little bit of an embarrassing story here, but I was in a group, and I was in this group with these other women entrepreneurs, and even there were men entrepreneurs in there too, actually. And they would say things like, I just got this download, and I just got this intuitive nudge, and I went with it, and I just had a $10,000 day. And for me, I'm like, I'm happy for them. But also, and it's not like in a comparison or thing or competitive way, but I'm like, I'm happy for them. But if I look at myself, and this is where it's kind of embarrassing, but I look at myself and I go, I'm just as smart. I'm just as qualified. I have clear messaging. I know what I'm like. I mean, I had all the boxes ticked.
Right.
And they weren't in those levels that I felt I was at. And they were having these massive successes all because they just had this thought and they went
feeling
with it. Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, I was so mad. And I was like, one of the coaches would be like, oh, I know that's aligned. I just got tingles all over my body. And I'd be like, I'm not feeling any tingles. Right. Or, oh, I just got this gut feeling. And I'm like, I'm not getting any of that. And so I was so mad because I was like, I feel like these entrepreneurs that I'm surrounding myself with, rightfully so, have this super secret power that I don't have, and my business is suffering because of it. And it wasn't until I took a course on intuition specifically, because I think we all do this. We're like, all right, I have a gap here. Like, let me learn about this and figure it out. And so I took this course on it. And in this course, they suggested that there's actually 60, that is a 6 and a 0, different ways that you can experience intuition. And that, of course, everyone has it, but it's unique to you. So when I was sitting there going, well, I'm not getting full body tingles, or I'm not getting a taste in my mouth, or, whatever, I thought I wasn't intuitive. And the truth of it is that I needed to find my intuitive fingerprint.
Gotcha.
And the momentum and the movement that happened in my business from there was crazy, because I started being able to tap into my intuition, which led to aligned and congruent action. That aligned and congruent action took my marketing and put so much massive momentum behind it, which then was supported by my operations that allowed me to scale, which then freed me up to say, okay, what are the strategies I can do to add velocity, most importantly, without burnout, and ultimately execute with ease. And thus the iMove method was born, because I realized that so many of us I
Mhm.
mean, maybe they weren't as pissed off as I am, but so many of us are like, well, I don't have that. And maybe I'm not meant for this. And they're getting the intuitive downloads, or they're connecting to this and they're
Mhm.
getting all of these results and I'm not. And maybe I'm not cut out for this. And the truth of it is like, no, we've
Yeah.
just got to find your intuitive way to, most
Yep.
importantly, take that aligned and congruent action. And so since then, everything for the companies and the businesses that I work with and for, and my customers and my clients, is through that iMove lens of like, what makes the most sense here? And
Mhm.
when I look back at the corporate career, and I'm going to hone in out of the 15 years, I'm going to hone in on the 3 years when we were working with Google specifically.
Yeah.
I was running on intuition. I just didn't know it. I'd be like,
Oh.
oh, we need to fill in this space. We need to fill in this space. We need to fill in this space. And I would be getting those intuitive hits and we were just crushing it, which is why we grew from a team of 0 team members to 30 in such a short amount of time. How we were able
Mhm.
to offer the services and the languages and all of these things. It was all intuition on fire and I just didn't realize it. And so
Mhm.
when I'm going to say escaped, when I escaped the corporate space and I started looking at doing it for my own business, it was like, oh snap. Yeah. Like, when I use my intuition, things really get a fire underneath them. Like that's adding the gasoline. And so
Mhm.
being able to do that for my clients and my customers now as
Right.
part of the iMove is everything. So that's the
So
long
cool.
version of how I
I
created
love
it.
it. I love it. That's fantastic. And what's really cool about that story is like you had that foundation of move to begin with, that strong foundation of process that made everything, like you said, move. But what was missing was that magic, which is that intuition that I think, again, a lot of us tend to sort of um, really discount, especially as
Yep.
women, because it feels too woo. But then I love that you're just like getting right behind it. And a couple of things you said reminded me of like I think also as women we tend to also discard or try to tamp down our anger. And I think between our anger and our envy, you need to really pay attention to when and where it shows up. And I often tell people to follow your envy. It's showing you what you want. So whenever you start to
Absolutely.
feel that sense of envy or even anger or frustration at somebody having something you don't, you need to ask yourself, what am I lacking? What is it that I need that they have that I'm not getting? That's what envy is showing you. And then I always say, don't get furious, get curious. And I love that. I felt like you did that in that moment. Like you got mad and then you're like, but wait, so okay, what am I lacking in my intuition? So we did have a question from one of our live listeners,
Mhm.
like, what was the resource that you used to sort of kind of tap into and understand like the ways in which you felt, find, or your specific type of intuition sensing?
Yeah. So I actually, I have as part of the eye of the business,
Okay.
I have that as a resource.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I speak on it often. I
Mm-hmm.
share a story that is, it's called my 8-figure intuition, where I received, I'm going to give you the really quick rundown,
Yeah.
but I was walking one day and I received an intuitive thought that I could be an 8-figure entrepreneur. And I was like, I count out on my hands, like how much is 8 figures, which is a minimum of 10 million, right?
Yep.
And I was like, ha ha ha, sure. Like, and then I started thinking, okay, what are all I have to sell X amount of this at this price and all that. And then
Mm-hmm.
I got the overwhelming feeling of release those expectations. So I was just like, we're going to ride the wave of this intuitive idea that I can be an 8-figure entrepreneur. And I did a series of things, which we can share the link. But I
Mm-hmm.
did a series of things where, crazy enough, in the span of a 2-week period, I had the thought, and 2 weeks later, because of the stuff that I did, intuitively led, and part of that is following the 60 intuitive strengths, right? I know mine. I had this opportunity drop in my lap. And it was insane. I never would have been on my radar as a thing to even be possible. And it was actually one of the companies I'm an owner in now. The woman was like, how come I don't know you? Like, we need to connect. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
we connected after this event and we spoke for about an hour and she goes, okay, I need you on my team.
That's
And I
awesome.
was like, okay, well, I'm not in it to get back into corporate. So, like,
Yeah.
contractor work, things like that. And I ended up being contracted as the COO of that organization for a year. Now I'm on the board of directors. It's one of the companies I'm an owner in. And what was fascinating is we negotiated in the contract for 1% ownership. After signing the contract and we're contracting and working together, she said, hey, we've already signed up with an M&A broker, that's mergers and acquisitions, and they believe that we can sell this company for $1 billion. So part of my role as COO was to come in and make sure we were scaling and operating appropriately to be able to match that that valuation and the ability to sell in 3 to 5 years for that amount. I went home and went, let me look at that contract, right? And 1% of $1 billion is 10 million, which is the 8 figures. And that just dropped in my lap. And so I share that story very quickly because I do have a resource where I share the 8 crazy actions that I did. And one of those is to utilize my intuitive strengths. And in that, I have a resource. So I will put that link here in the chat really quick.
Thanks.
Right there. And it's completely free. It's an email series, video series that walks you through the 8 crazy things I did and ends with the 60 intuition pieces. So that's just a free resource that I have on hand that can help discover those and know your type.
Fantastic. I love it. And then, kind of on this topic before we move on, because I could just talk about intuition all day long. I think it's such an important skill to bring back into our lives because I think, especially society, just tampers it down so much. And we're so full of it, especially as women. How could we start to learn to trust and leverage our intuition in our business and decision-making skills? Like, what is one thing maybe that our listeners could take away and start to do to build that up?
Absolutely. And I will say this too, in the corporate world, there always is this need for justification, right? Oh, you need to do, like, if I have a thought, oh, we should do this way. And it's like, well, why? I just feel intuitively led. Like, that's not, hopefully that would fly in a modern corporate space, but in some corporate spaces, like, that's not going to fly. And so there's always this need to like justify or have the data to back up and these components where I think that is a huge deterrent and damper on your intuition, because you may have this thought to try this thing and it may be the thing that will take everything to this next level, but because you can't justify it or because it hasn't been done or seen before, so there's no case studies to support it, right? It may get shut down, or you may start to shut it down before you even let it see the light of day. And so I know that I kind of had that a little bit, but being in the entrepreneur space, I just was on fire and not realizing that I was using my intuition. But that said, I think one of the best things that I have found for myself and for my clients to help start to trust and develop that intuition, I'm going to say it's twofold. One is figuring out, okay, how do I actually receive intuition? For me, my main intuitive strength is a sense of adventure. So if I'm going to put on my backpack that's 40 pounds with a water bottle, and I got my thick wool socks so I don't get blisters, and my hiking boots, and I got everything prepared for the dog, and I've got my granola bars, and we're going to go hike up this mountain, and every turn is a beautiful look, and I'm so excited and I love it here, versus, oh, my socks, my feet are hot, and I'm getting a blister, and oh, is this bend the end? I'm ready to go home, and this backpack is so heavy, and I've got to carry my dog poops bag, all this stuff. Like, there's such a big difference between those two energies,
mentalities.
And so for me, my intuitive strength is a sense of adventure. So when I feel that, like, ooh, I could hike up this mountain and I'm excited about it and it feels right, that's a yes for me. So that's how, when the founder of the organization said, hey, I want you to be in my team, I was like, check in. Oh, sense of adventure. This is a yes. Versus a no, I don't want to be involved, with this again, or, anything like that. It's sense of adventure is a yes. So the first and foremost is learn your intuitive strength type so that you can follow it. And then the second thing, part 2 of this, is document your successes. That is so huge because we undervalue what we've done in the past. Like I said, I can look back now, and if I'm looking at a lens of my intuition, I'm like, oh, I was on fire when I was in the corporate space. Like, I was crushing my intuition. Like, it was amazing. Yeah. If I didn't try to go back and go, when did my intuition prove right? When did my intuition work for me? When was everything working for me? And what was I doing that was intuitively led by then, I never could go back and be like, actually, I was doing the reason it worked the way it worked was because I was following my intuition. So creating a success book that when you feel like, I don't know, I just have this weird thought, like you can go back to that book and have documented proof that your intuition works, but also I'm going to say documented proof that you're a badass. So like, let's keep on following that intuition, keep on being a badass, and watch how everything falls into place. Because I'm going to say it again, most important phrase here, aligned and congruent action. When you take the actions that aren't aligned and aren't congruent with who you are, where you are, who you want to be, and where you want to go, right? That's when you hit the roadblocks, the walls, the stumble, and you're trying to force things and you're wondering why it's not working and you feel stagnant and stuck. Aligning congruent action is huge. So knowing your intuitive strength, style, type, and documenting your successes and your wins, the combination of that is a great way to start to really lean into your intuition.
Those are fantastic advices or pieces of advice. And I love that idea of a success book. We talk about keeping like a woo folder where you put like your kudos and things like that. But I love the idea of tracking your own wins and like, especially those intuitive successes, because it's that positive reinforcement and validation of those actions and the things that you followed through on, like you said, to encourage that congruent action, aligned and congruent. I love it. All right, let's move on to M for marketing. There are some common pitfalls, but what are some common pitfalls that you see specifically in marketing when people are trying to promote their own business, and how could the iMove method help them start to overcome these?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest pitfall that I see with marketing is that so many entrepreneurs, small business owners, people that I love that you said entrepreneurial curious, because they'll start marketing, like you'll test the waters, is that the belief that content marketing is enough. I'm from the generation and the marketing and the advertising side where it's like content is king, content is king, content is king. And even now we hear, oh, you've got to have your video marketing and you've got to have your podcast, you've got to have your blog, and you've got to have, the stuff on Instagram and Facebook and like there's so much. And a lot of the business owners that I know and I work with, there's a couple of pitfalls within that. They feel overwhelmed. Because it's like you got to be everywhere at once at all times for everyone, which is not true, but that's what it starts to feel like.
Right.
And then two, and this is the most important component of this, that we've bought into that content marketing should be enough. So I'm creating content. I'm in this space. I'm pushing. I'm trying to connect with my audience. I'm trying to be informative. I'm trying to be entertaining. I'm trying to be inspiring. Like I've got my content pillars. Like we've got all these pieces and it's like, and it's not going anywhere. And that is because in the marketing space, we've bought the lie that content marketing is enough, and it's not. And I look at it this way. We've all heard about lead gen, and a lot of folks are like, well, my content marketing is my lead gen. No, it's not. Okay. So your content marketing is your nurturing. So I always make the joke, but it might hit pretty close to home, which is there's a reason why it feels like you're talking to the same 6 people over and over again. 3 of them are already clients. 2 is your mom and your sister. And the 6th one is your sister's dog's account. Right. And you're like, I feel like I can't reach those next levels. And that's because you're relying on the content marketing, and content marketing is your nurturing phase. So we want to look at, okay, how can we get out in front of the right audience and bring them to you by providing value? So we start to look at all the different categories of lead generation, right? So whether that's being a guest on podcasts, whether that's hosting podcasts, whether that's going to speaking at or hosting your own events, whether that's advertising, whether that's SEO, search engine optimization, right? There's a huge list of things that you can do to bring in your audience, right? To bring in leads. That's your lead gen channels, if you will. So we use intuition to say, okay, what feels good? Let's pick 1 or 2, not all 10. Right. That's the overwhelm, right? We're simplifying here, right? What actually feels right? So I have a client that it was like, oh my gosh, I really want to just go speak. I don't like social media. I don't like the pressure of that. Yeah. I love connecting and working with people. I just really want to go speak. And I was like, awesome. Now, phase 2, And some people have this, some people don't, which is having a valuable resource to connect them with.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, yeah, you're going and speaking on podcasts and things like that, but do you have a resource to connect them with?
Mm-hmm.
And funny enough, I didn't plan on my resource being the 8 Crazy Actions email series today, but here we are. And that's my resource for people on intuition. It's like, hey, check out this video series, 3 minutes a day for 8 days, and you get true actionable stuff that I did to generate an 8-figure opportunity and tap into my intuition, and you can have that too. Right? So it's this resource, and there's a million different ways you can do the resource. Is it a PDF? Is it a quiz? Is it an email series? Is it a secret podcast? Is it, it's so many different things. And so again, we select 1 or 2 that feel right, that we can create easily, that make sense, and we send that. So I'm on a podcast, for example. I have my resource. I can say, hey, go here, check this out. It's going to be really valuable to you. Now, those emails and that information they're in my ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And now I can say, hey, go follow me on social media so you can learn more there. But I can also take the social media aspects that I'm building and have built and put those in an email. So it's in your inbox. And now I'm providing that value. I am educational. I am inspirational. I'm providing that value to you, nurturing to the point where I can say, hey, by the way, like you're in business, you're getting this all figured out, you're crushing it on the iMove method. Let's find and fill any gaps that you have. Come and do a business audit and strategy session with me. Mm-hmm. And now we've taken them from lead and, if we're in the marketing space, right, awareness to information gathering, to evaluation, to purchase. And so many small business owners, if you don't come from a marketing background, miss that and have bought this idea that, well, I just need to create content, and then it doesn't work. But also, I could say, hey, you could listen to like Alex Hormozy or somebody like that. It's like lead gen, lead gen, lead gen. And you're like, okay, well, here's a million different ways I've got to do lead gen. And you feel like I've got to do them all, which that's where the intuition comes in. It's like, what actually aligns and make sense for you?
Yeah.
I had a client that she tried all these different strategies and all these different ways. And then when she found that hosting events was the thing, she was like, oh, I can wash away all the expectations and all of the just churning and spinning my wheels. This feels right. I'm going to host events and use these events to create these relationships and connect with these amazing people and bring in my ideal client and have them be in my space. And now I can nurture them to then become customers, clients, friends, partners, etc. And so it really is that, like, that's the number one pitfall that I see is the overwhelm or the lack of the knowledge and thinking that content's just going to save you. And you've got to be connecting and having conversations and building those leads. And I hesitate to say leads because they're people, right? They're potential clients.
I love it. They're humans.
They're humans. And so it's the relationship and the conversations.
Yeah.
The more of those that you can build and have a streamlined way to be able to do that, right? Now you can really see the marketing develop and grow in your business, because alternatively, third thing I see is that they will build out an entire, here's my offer, fully built out. Let's say it's a course. I had a client the other day that she was like, she came to me and she said, I want to build this course. I've outlined it. This is the audience it's for. Cool. And so I said, that's awesome. I think we're totally down to do that. However, what I want to give you as homework is I want you to go talk to 40 people who are that ideal client and just talk about this course, talk about your business, just create those relationships and conversations and see what happens. And I was thinking she's going to get the pain points and the information. This is what these people really need, so it will support building the course. Turned out better than I could have expected, because she came back and said, this is not my ideal client. I don't want to work with them, and I don't want to build a course for them. And I'm like, beautiful. You went out, you had conversations, and you realized that what you thought you wanted and where you're going in your business actually isn't aligned. And so now we're pivoting, and you can now move in trusting your intuition as well, but also you know what you want at a deeper level instead of spending all this time, effort, and energy building something that you don't want to work with the audience, that you don't want to sell, and you wasted all this time in your business, which we can't really afford to waste time, right?
Oh my
You wasted all
gosh.
this time in your business because you weren't willing to have the conversations. So conversations, relationships, humanity, we can call that leads if we want to simplify it, right? But leads to a resource that supports and helps them, bringing them into your space so then your content can nurture them to become clients.
I love that so much. I think it's really, really brilliant. I think it's so true. As marketers, we can just kind of fall into that trap and cycle of what feels like comfortable and safe and familiar. And it's like when you get into the sales aspect, it does start to feel sort of like, creepy, scary. I don't know. But like leads is a part of it. And lead gen is such an important part of it. And there is that gap, I think, between lead gen, sales, and marketing, right? Where it's like, if you're all lead gens all the time, you're not nurturing and bringing people into the space and making those conversions. So then there's a broken spot, there's a broken rung there. And then the same thing for constantly, like you just said, with content, you're just constantly playing the nurturer, but never actually moving the needle and bringing people into conversion. So you're like, great, I'm getting engagement, but where are my clicks? That's so brilliant, Taylor. You're so freaking smart. All right, let's move on to the next one, because again, each one of these questions I could go on forever, and I want to keep us on pace. And I know the audience may have questions too. All right, in the fast-paced world of digital marketing, in specific, nope, I jumped ahead. For those of us working within larger companies, how can we apply the operations, the O aspect of iMove into streamlining processes that drive growth, even if we're not in leadership opportunities? And I'm asking this because I know a lot of the women that are listening kind of sit in this space, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I'm so excited for this question. I have to tell you, operations is like, out of the iMove, operations is the least sexy. And because of that, it is my favorite because it causes the most like traction. And I love it. So
Yeah.
I'm going to share a story from my corporate space, and then we'll get into it. So when I was growing that, again, we're going to use that same 3-year model here. I had team leads, right? There's no way I could have 30 team members all underneath just me. Like I had team leads, and we had different initiatives and things like that for different clients and the different languages and different products and services. And in that, one of my team leads, I said, hey, I need you to build me a standard operating procedure, SOP, of this process. And she goes, oh, it's not hard. It's only like 3 steps. I said, dude, I totally get it. I appreciate the simplicity. If you go on PTO, you get sick, something happens to you.
Right.
I do not know what those 3 steps are. And quite frankly, in a year from now, I'm not going to remember what those 3 steps are.
Nope.
So if you wouldn't mind, would you please document it for me? And granted, this was like she doesn't need to go to her team. I'm never going to look at it unless I absolutely have to.
Sure.
But like, hey, can we document this? And she's like, yeah, sure. So a couple hours later, she comes back and she goes, so 50 steps later.
Right.
And I'm like, like I knew it wasn't 3 simple steps and all the links and, all these things and the clicks and here's where we need to go to do this. And here's the file to pull this and all of that. And so I'm like, now I feel very equipped. This has a couple of different approaches from the team aspect.
Yeah.
One, I feel equipped that if something happens or she has an emergency, I can step in and fulfill that role, or I could give it to a team member and they could step in and fulfill that component.
Right.
Solidly, right? 2, it helped her see how amazing she is.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, it's just 3 steps. No, actually 50 steps later, like you're amazing. Like you're keeping track of all of that. And third, and this is where we also have a crossover into solo and entrepreneurship, is it freed up her mind. Because now, instead of remembering 50 extra steps and simplifying it to 3, but it's still 50 extra steps, she can just go to her checklist when that's an item to do, follow her own SOP, and she can optimize from it and all those other pieces. But she now doesn't have the mental and the emotional space taken up by that task.
Yeah.
Okay. That crosses over into the solo entrepreneurship space huge, right? Even if you're on your own, and this is that also, like, you're a team member, maybe you're not leading a team, maybe it's just for you. The number one thing I can say about operations, the starting point, is building out standard operating procedures, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for another team member, whether it's for a single component in your business. Building out SOPs is huge. Fast forward. So while I was in corporate, as part of this business and the coaching piece, I had a online book club. I know this like the back of my hand, and I didn't do it until it was a 3-year long book club. And a year and a half in, I went, oh, I'm going to create an SOP. I built my SOP, and there was over 30 different tasks that I had been managing in my brain. Down to, on the 5th is when we launch the book. On the 20th is when we vote for the book. Every Friday, I send a prompt. This is before we could do scheduled posts, right? Every Friday, I send a prompt. Here's the follow-up for the Zoom call where we do this. I need to create the bookmark. I need to create the questions. I need to do all these things. And there was dates and times connected every month. And I was starting to drop the ball, because it'd be the 22nd. And I was like, oh, shoot, I didn't post that we need to start voting on the next month's book. And so there was less time for voting, and it created a friction in the customer experience. So I was like, I got to build an SOP. The amount of space that freed up in my brain was huge, and I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And so whether you are working on your own in your business, or you're working for a company and maybe you're not having a team and you're not having to build out all these great big operational pieces, even having SOPs for how you do the daily minutia tasks, right? Having an SOP that is now, I just pull up my checklist and boom, 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 is so much better for your mental and creativity capacity.
Yeah,
also, once it's documented, you can be like, I don't need that step. Yep. Or I'm taking 5 steps to do this, but now there's an AI program that can do it. I could just replace that. And now you can optimize in efficiencies because you have it written down and it's out of your head trying to remember. And now it's on paper and you can figure out how to make it better.
Absolutely. I think this was always like a head scratcher for others when I was still in the creative space, like why I was always so hell-bent on having a process and being such a stickler for it. Because I was like, don't you understand? Process makes the way to allow for more brain space for time to be creative. And if I don't have a process, I'm constantly recreating the wheel. And so when I started in my role at Together Digital as CEO, that was one of the first things. I agree with you. I think ops are super sexy, and I love creating process and timelines and Gantt charts and, you know, all these checklists and all these things, because I do believe it just makes, for all the reasons you just mentioned, it helps you optimize your time. It optimizes the ability to kind of get your workflow down. It lets you just, it just makes so much sense. I think when I only struggle is that I think, and I'm curious to see what you think, is like when you create these SOPs, and if you aren't quite as jazzed as maybe you and I are, getting people to read through them, follow them, adapt them. What are some tips that you have there? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I also love SOPs because they tell me where I need to fill in gaps for hiring. Right. And I then use those SOPs as onboarding and training materials.
Yeah.
Which, let's say that we create one and it's an employee that's already existing, or a team member that's already with us, already been on the team. And it's like, hey, we're going to implement this. That's my job as a leader to coach, which I love SOPs for this reason, because it gives me a leg to stand on.
Yeah.
Hey, looks like we missed this, and this in this process or in this final result. Did you use the SOP? Oh no, I forgot.
Bring it back to that. Yeah. Okay.
Bring it back to that. And so it's now, instead of me being like, well, we need to do this, this, and this, and we missed this, I'm like, hey, did you take a look at the SOP? And if it keeps on happening, I'm like, I know you're not using the SOP. And right. But also I love the SOPs too, because they are not micromanaging. I can say,
it's true.
I want you to use the SOP for the first little while, and then I want you to figure out how we can make this better.
Yes,
and let's work on that. So now it's a coaching mechanism.
Yes.
It's a foundation mechanism.
Yes.
It's a collaboration and team growth mechanism.
Right.
It supports all of those pieces in this one document. And again, if somebody's like less than enthusiastic about it, If they're not dropping anything, then okay. And that's just like
Fine.
a once a quarter, will you go and check the SOP and make sure that it still aligns with your workflow and processes so that we can have a backup in case anything happens? And if things are starting to drop, now I have a foundation to say, hey, remember, this is a checklist here for you to help prevent these mistakes and help us both get better. So let's use the SOP and see how that goes.
I love it. That's great advice. Thank you. I do. I love it as a coaching tool, and I agree with you. It's like one of those things where you don't want to I agree. I don't like to micromanage. No. And so it's like you don't want to over mandate, but I love it as saying like this is your foundation to help you know how to get started. But if you see opportunity for improvement within the process, then this is like you're again, I like to encourage entrepreneurship, and I like to try to hire entrepreneurs and encourage, anybody that works with us to be an entrepreneur and innovate and find ways to make the whole better, right? It's not just like stick in your lane and do your just like this job over here, right? Like grow and expand, because we like even my title, as soon as I became, I was CEO for a while, and then I bought the business, and I'm like, well, CEO can stand for chief executive officer. It also stands for chief empowerment officer, right? And so I want to live up to that. So it's like, that's the beauty, I think, of, again, running and owning your own business, folks. Just,
100%. For those entrepreneurial curious.
Right? All right, let's go to velocity now, since I was so excited to get to that. The fast-paced world of digital marketing. V for velocity is obviously a pretty critical thing. It feels like we have to always be moving a mile a minute. How could our listeners increase their business velocity without sacrificing quality or burnout?
Yeah. So I'm going to say that all of these pieces build on each other, right? Like the iMove, you can consider it a circle, right? But also like your intuition is guiding your marketing, which is guiding your operational needs. And once you hit that point, like you start to see, okay, I'm doing all this work, 80% of it, and we know these stats, but we just don't think about it as business owners, which is we know these stats. I'm spending 80% of my time, or 100% of my time, 80% of it is just kind of going through the motions. 20% is actually resulting in growth, velocity, momentum.
Right.
And so once you have like the marketing is working, like boom, we're crushing it there. The operations are in place and continuing to evolve because they're a living, growing being in your business, right? Yeah. But then it's like, okay, what can we do to streamline this? Like, what are our efforts that are actually working? What are our efforts that are more of a longer term play? Where are we spending our time that may not be giving us the best results? And how can we streamline that and select strategies? I don't recommend more than 3 at one time. Right? Select strategies that help add that velocity. And when we're selecting those strategies, if we're using our intuition to help guide, now we're able to do it without the burnout because it's aligned and congruent. There is nothing worse than being like, oh, I have to record a podcast episode.
Yeah.
To help my business. Nobody wants that energy. We don't want that energy as potential customers and clients.
Or listeners.
You don't want that energy in your business, right?
Right.
But if that's like, you're like, well, I'm supposed to, I should have a podcast, right? And I'm going to share a story here too. So one of the things that I love to do with my clients is called Quantum Power Days. Called Quantum Power Days because we tap into your innate power and quantum leap your business forward. Usually in one day, we accomplish 3 months worth of work. We did over 30 in the last 12 months year. And every time without fail, my clients have said, it would have taken me 3 months to do this on my own.
That's amazing.
And the momentum and everything is there. Part of that is that we look at the streamlining of velocity and we lean into intuition. So I had a client that we were banging out all the to-do items because it's executional work. It's not let's just talk about it, right? Yeah. So we're banging out like all the things that we need to do. And on the list of stuff that she wanted to get done was to build a course. However, every time she spoke about the course, her body would go a little bit more concave. Her voice tenor would go a little bit shaky. And I picked up on that. Yeah. And so I said, hey, like we're getting to the point to create the course, but I just want to know, like, why do you want to create a course? And this is the biggest thing with velocity. She said, well, I feel like I should. Should.
Don't should on yourself.
Exactly. You want to add velocity to your business, take out the items that you think you should be doing and do the ones that will actually help you grow. So, and that you want to do and you're excited about. So she goes, I feel like I should, and I want the reoccurring monthly revenue. I said, okay, yeah, no problem. Like, I've helped people build out their courses in our Power Days before. Like, this is not a big deal. However, I have a question for you. Could you talk about this course in your marketing for 90 days straight and still be stoked out of your mind about this course?
Mm.
And she goes, no. I'm like, oh, okay, that's totally fine. Let's look at this then. If you could do anything you wanted to do, because we're entrepreneurs, also because we're human, we can.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you could do anything you wanted to do, what would it be? And she goes, honestly, like, I would love to host retreats. I love coaching and working in small, intimate settings and then working one-on-one. I said, awesome. Let's look at what it looks like to build a retreat. How does that feel? And she goes, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I could build a retreat. So we took the time in her Power Day and built out the whole retreat model. And in that, I'm shortcutting here, but in that, we built in, if she sold it out, which was for 10 people, if she sold it out, she would make $20,000 profit for the 3 days worth of work, right? 3 days of the retreat. We also built in that in the retreat, there'd be a time where she would talk about and be able to sell into her one-on-one program, which was $50,000 a year. Okay, so we built out everything to set this up for success, not only operationally, but marketing-wise and messaging and audience and all of that. So fast forward, she hosts her first retreat and she sells it out. Okay, so there's $20,000 profit. She hosts her second retreat. She actually ends up overselling it. She had 12 people there and 11 of the, so there's an extra 20 plus thousand in profit. Making this a viable business. I think that's an important thing to note, right? You have to be profitable.
Right.
And 11 of those 12 signed up for her next level program.
Her individual. Wow.
So when I look at velocity, I can't tell you how the course would have gone. Right? I can't see into the future and be like, yeah, but I know that the energy behind it, the shoulds, all of those pieces, we're going to take the velocity and just wipe it out, right? And now you're spinning your wheels trying to create this course. You create the course, now you got to market it, and it's not a they will build it or you build it, they will come. Like that, I don't know how that has gotten into the world that like you build a course and suddenly it's successful and monthly recurring revenue. No, like you'll still have to market it. You still have to sell it. You still have to have the energy and promotion behind it. Anyways, it's not a build it, they will come. And so I can't tell you what would have happened with her course.
Right.
However, I can say with fairly high confidence that selling out and retreats and having 11 people sign up for your $50,000 a year program probably was not going to happen in those numbers with those margins. No. Yeah, not with those courses. And so when we look at velocity, to pull this all back, the number one thing I look at is what are you feeling like you should be doing versus what are you wanting to do and following the energy of what you want to do to guide your business.
Love it, love it, love it. We're like at time. I'm going to ask you my last question, but I seriously could keep going. All right, because we got to get to the E and the iMove. Otherwise, it's like my OCD would just not be happy. The E in iMove stands for execution. What advice do you have for women who are struggling to kind of do that when it comes to executing big ideas and strategies? Like whether it's analysis paralysis, imposter syndrome, whatever label they want to throw on it.
Sure. So I think the very first thing that we need to understand is that all the other areas of iMove, it's iMove, it's incomplete without the E, right? And the E is your only superpower. We've talked about how everyone here we're unicorns in our own right, and we know how to do all of these things, and we're amazing, badass, incredible women. Whether you're an entrepreneur, entrepreneurial curious, or in corporate, like we're incredible. We can get stuff done. Had to keep swearing there for a second. We can get stuff done.
That's fine.
However, the getting the stuff done is the only superpower that we have. We can talk about intuition all day, but if you don't actually listen to it and execute from it, gets you nowhere. We can talk about marketing. We can build out the strategies. It can look really pretty and nice, but until it actually is published and executed on, means nothing. Same thing with operational processes. Same thing with simplifying for velocity. We could talk all day long about those, but the only superpower we have, you can be the prettiest, the smartest, the most successful, the most talented, all of these things in the room. If you're not executing, none of that matters.
Right. Yep.
So that's first and foremost. Second off, when we're not able to execute, in most cases, we'll say, oh, I just don't have the time. Okay. I'm going to share right now. I'm going to share
another hour conversation time. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes. Dude, we could go, I think we could pick each one of these apart and have entire episodes on each one. But everyone says, oh, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. I don't have the time.
Yep.
And the truth of it is that in many instances, there's a belief or a resistance in the form of a limiting belief or in the form of the shoulds. There's a resistance that keeps us from taking that action. So when it's like, okay, well, is it imposter syndrome? Or is it that I don't have enough time? Or is it because of these things? Where's that resistance coming from? And identify like, well, I actually have a belief that if I'm seen, I have a client right now actually that she worked with a coach. And with that coach, she created a system and a program. And a year later, that coach came back and tried to sue her because they created the program together. Like completely, the coach was completely unethical, but that's a whole different thing. And so now she's a 6-figure entrepreneur, but she's worried that if she gets bigger, if she gets seen, she's going to get in trouble. She's going to get sued or whatever it is. Yes. And so, well, that's not necessarily true. Now that's a belief that's causing resistance. So she's hesitating in executing. So whenever we feel a hesitation in execution, we can talk productivity tools. We can talk calendar blocking. We can talk all those things that help with the time. But ultimately, my job is to say, okay, so where are we experiencing resistance around this? Is it because it was a should and it's not really aligned and congruent? Is it because there's a limiting belief blocking us? And once we clear that belief, will it be a 10 out of 10 energy and we're able to move forward? Or what is it there that's causing that resistance? And can we work through that so that you're able to execute with ease? Because also maybe we're executing, but it's procrastination and it's like slogging through and you hate this the whole time. And that's where the execution with ease comes in, is because we're tapping to the intuition. We're looking at the shoulds. We're simplifying the marketing. We're simplifying and writing down the processes. We're coming in and saying, where are we holding ourselves back from velocity? And when you clear all those pieces and set it up with the rest of the iMove, the execution with ease, that resistance is gone and it becomes easy.
Yeah. I was going to say, I can totally see that. It makes so much sense. Execution. I wrote it down before you said it. Execution becomes easy when your actions are aligned and congruent. Listen to me. I'm such a good learner. And you're such a fantastic teacher. Taylor, you're just a little over time, which we will have to have you back so we can keep talking. This is great. Again, we have shared a number of links in the chat. So live listeners, make sure you grab those before we log off. We'll definitely include those in the show notes as well for those of you who are listening afterwards in the podcast recording. But Taylor, thank you so much for just everything you're doing. It's also super inspiring, like your energy, your passion, like you're not just saying it, you're doing it. And I think that, you just finding your superpower and then using it to empower others. It's very inspiring and it's very awesome. So thank you for what you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And it's been an honor and delight to be here. And I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. I hope you're all feeling super jazzed and ready to go conquer the world now and do some awesome things with the new iMove processes that you've learned. We're excited. I know I'm going to go kick off and go do some research and some more reading. We're excited. We're back. It was a 2-week break. So this is a great way to start back after our break. And we hope to see you all next week. Until then, keep asking, keep giving, and keep growing. We'll see you all next week. Bye.
Produced by Heartcast Media.